Alright, so during our retrospective of the Battle Arena Toshinden series, I might have haphazardly and ignorantly presumed that the Game Boy Color port of the game stood as the best fighter on the system. That is until someone pointed out a game that I never heard of before, Power Quest. And I kinda brushed it off at first, because the last time I listened to a group of people saying some old niche game was supposed to be amazing, we ended up playing most of the Toshinden games. But one boring afternoon with nothing to do, that comment worked its way back into my head. So I decided to give it the old download, and you know what? Yeah, it's pretty damn good. So let's talk about it. This is one half of Team Crossbody, the final boosh, and I'm covering Power Quest. Let's get to know the company behind the game real quick. Japan System Supply, a company I knew nothing about beyond the fact that they made Chameleon Twist, which just so happens to be one of the very first platformers I ever touched, apparently spent the 80s and 90s being way more ambitious than anyone gave them credit for. They bounced between video games, educational software, and even some early what if we made an online game before anyone actually had the internet for it experiments. They kicked off in 1985, made a bunch of eccentric stuff, and then quietly dipped out of existence in 2000. Like they realized being overly creative is expensive. And right in the middle of their existence, the Mad Lads made Power Quest. Japan System Supply developed it, with Capcom publishing it in Japan for the original Game Boy in 1998 under the name Gekido Power Monitor. Sunsoft handled the North American release, now sporting a fresh Game Boy Color palette and a much catchier Americanized name Power Quest, which honestly is a pretty sick name. Sadly, Power Quest ended up being something like Japan System Supply's swan song. They shut down a couple of years later, leaving behind a weird, charmingly, criminally overlooked gem. So yeah, my relationship with GSS used to begin and end with Chameleon Twist. But now, thanks to Power Quest, I'm realizing they weren't just weird tongue platformer people. They were a studio quietly shooting for the moon, even though they ran out of fuel halfway there. Now, Power Quest could have released just as a bare bones pocket fighter, not to be confused with the actual pocket fighter, and I still would have totally brought it as a kid just by the name alone. But to my shock, Japan System Supply were actually considerate and added a pretty lengthy campaign mode, which makes a lot of sense given that this game is on the Game Boy, and there were pretty good odds that you'd be playing this by yourself. The plot involved isn't anything complex, especially if you use similar concepts such as Metabots, Mega Man Battle Network, or Angelic Lair. Wasn't expecting that Angelic Lair name drop, huh? Anyway, Power Quest kicks off with you, a kid who has apparently decided that the true path to greatness lies in becoming the undisputed champion of tiny remote control robot beatdowns. You pick one of 6 model robots, each basically a miniature Street Fighter character with its own stats and special moves. And then you just start walking around looking for all the smoke. In this town, everyone is way too enthusiastic about children settling disputes with mechanized fistfights. You've got random dudes on the street challenging you, shopkeepers casually selling robotic upgrades like it's totally normal, and a whole underground economy built around kids slapping parts into plastic toys to throw hands. Your goal is simple: win tournaments, earn money, upgrade your robot, and work your way towards the big national championship. Of course, because the plot is basically a battle showdown without any meaningful characters, there's a mysterious group lurking behind the scenes. An evil gang of, I want to say kids, who uses underhanded tactics, fixed fights, and straight up steals other kids' winnings. It gets so out of hand that your friend, the one who really needs to be reminded of what gender group he falls into, comes to you begging to help take them down. But big surprise, the villain uses the same cheap tactics on you and knocks you flat. Eventually, you find out that they've been using radio waves to mess with everyone's robots, and after you've been running around looking for literally anything to counter their nonsense, the shopkeep just casually steps in with the clutch assist and paints your little robot with some kind of special anti-radio wave coating that keeps him from goofing with your guy. Armed with your freshly painted EMF-proof robot, you go back and finally take them down. And I'll give Power Quest this though, at least the major bad guys aren't a terrorist group or some kind of world-ending organization. They're a bunch of dickheads, and honestly, I can appreciate that. It helps keep things down to earth instead of making your player, a kid, the solution to every city and statewide crisis. There's some other stuff that happens after that, but it all wraps up when the national tournament finally arrives. You have to fight all your rivals you met up to this point in a gauntlet-style survival match, until the final bout, which just happens to be against this masked guy rocking the same robot model as you. And that's it. You annually fight the same people over and over on a one-screen map, dealt with some admittedly cheap-ass input reading AI, stopped the bad guys, and won the national tournament. Mission accomplished. But maybe that wasn't the point. Maybe the true Power Quest was the money we made along the way. Sure, the single player stuff here is pretty shallow and nothing special, with the game immediately holding you hostage in endless repetitive fights, slowly earning tiny amounts of cash until you can finally afford the next upgrade. But it's a handheld game, designed for short bursts of plugging away until you eventually finish it. And with that in mind, it's pretty solid stuff when it's all said and done. But luckily, the actual gameplay itself is what the game leads on to impress. And with that being said, this is a shockingly competent fighter.
Hey, hold on to your seats!
Of course, being on the Game Boy, Power Quest is a 2-button fighter, with every attack centered around a light and heavy version. Specials and supers are handled with your standard quarter circle or shuriken style inputs, and the game is surprisingly lenient with the input window. Maybe a little too lenient, as I found myself randomly doing dragon punches on occasion. But hey, take it slow, and it works just fine. A typical moveset in this game usually consists of a throw, 1 or 2 command normals, and 2 supers. If you're primarily playing on single player like me, you can eventually buy the ability to guard cancel, which, much like supers, drains your character's super meter. The fighting system is surprisingly robust, featuring most of the mechanics you expect from the genre: cross-ups, anti-airs, frame traps, juggles, special counters, tick throws, and even linking normals together for longer, more powerful combos. There are 5 characters to choose from. Max specializes in punching mostly, but he's your typical Shoto with a power wave style fireball, Shoryuken, and advance and dash punches that serves as a stand-in for the Tatsu. Speed is, well, the speedy rushdown fighter that centers around kicking, sporting mostly leg-based special moves that includes a dive kick. All of her moves can be spaced in a way that makes them feel safe or even plus on block. Now, I don't have any frame data on hand to prove that, but anyone who knows these old school fighting games understands the unspoken rule. If you're blocking an attack and you don't instantly hit back, then that move is safe, until proven otherwise. Gong stands as the hard-hitting big body with the all too important splash and jumping attack, and a command grab that's actually pretty nasty once the guard cancel is unlocked. Axel is the token weird god that feels like another Shoto. He has a solid fireball, but most of his attacks function similarly to Blanca, with him throwing his body towards the opponent both horizontally and at an upward angle for a DP attempt. There's a character called Burrot that looks like a training dummy style character, and it turned out that he actually was, so I didn't really bother with him. And then there's Long, who is a rushdown character, but more well-rounded than Speed with a fast fireball and Adon's Jaguar kicks. But he doesn't particularly feel too nice to play, and his overall kit doesn't seem to mesh well together. With this game being so simple and me playing that damn single player mode for like 5 hours until I eventually cheated, I felt comfortable enough to tear these guys. Max will probably be the best character in the game. He's got a strong defense with his fireball and DP game, plus said DP making a solid guard cancel option. Speed just sits right under him. She's fast, has great combos, can control her jump arc with dive kicks, and can make them safe with TK dive kicks. She also seems to have a nasty, probably oppressive high-low game, plus good guard cancel options. Gong and Axel are the middle of the pack. They don't do anything particularly better than Max or Speed, but they don't really feel weak either. Gong edges Axel out slightly in my eyes because of his guard cancel command grab, giving him a solid punish game, where I feel as though Axel takes a little more risk when it comes to guard cancels. Long is bottom tier. Outside of his decent fireball, everything else just feels bad. I had a really hard time trying to convert any kind of damage with this guy. Sure, his DP works as a solid guard cancel option, but you could just pick Max and not lose anything. And Burrot, yeah, he sucks. There's no sugarcoating it. Overall, the fighting system for Power Quest just feels really coherent, tight, and solid. There's a real sense of neutral here that I never really felt from any other handheld fighter, and that includes past handheld brawlers that we did praise, like Gundam, Arbetta, or Arena Tosenden. It also doesn't suffer from the usual jank, like wonky hitboxes. Everything lands where it's supposed to, with little to no oddities, and that's kind of rare given the kind of game this is. So, do I take my words back? Is Power Quest the strongest fighter on the Game Boy? Honestly, I'm still not sure. For all its impressiveness, and it is impressive, there's still a few things that I favor in Tosenden GBC a little better. But hey, I've held your ear long enough. Maybe we'll compare the two sometime in the future. Besides, now that I got a taste for it, maybe we should check out the other GBC fighters to see how they hold up. because I've also heard really good things about that Street Fighter Alpha GBC port. For now, I'll catch you guys next time.